Today we got Don DiLego, musician, co-owner of Velvet Elk Records, and I see a little furry guy in the background.
Yeah, that's Evie.
Evie, what was that?
Evie, yeah,
Okay, not a guy then.
a little gal.
Little gal. You're in the Poconos, right?
Yeah, the studio is out here in right top Pocono Mountain, a town called Pocono Lake.
Why did you used to live in New York, right?
Yeah, I split my time. Years ago when I first moved to New York, I grew up in Western Mass in the Berkshires, and so it's kind of like my upbringing was more, the country. But when I first was in New York years ago, I was wanting a place outside of the city so that I could, get out to work on some music and just find something. So I'd spend my weekends going like up and down the Hudson and looking for before it was like a big deal.
Yeah.
But of course, I mean, I don't know why I was doing that because I didn't have any money to do anything anyway. But and then randomly, my girlfriend at the time, her sister said, "Hey, they were from Pennsylvania. They said, we have this little cabin kind of in the woods up in the Poconos, and we're not really using it. If you guys want to hang there and do some stuff on the weekends, you're welcome to do that." There's like a spare room in the back. So I kind of came out. I was like, "Where's the Poconos?" And I went out and expected this cabin in the woods, and it just turned out this like really nice house in the woods, but just like a nice house. And I started totally coming up all the time. They never came up. And I said, I fell in love with the place. And I said, if you guys ever want to sell it, let us know, hopefully in 10, 15 years, whenever maybe I have money. And a few weeks later, they said, yeah, we're going to sell that place now. So, but at the time we got a little help to pitch into for like a down payment from family and got the house. And so I've had it for well over 15, probably approaching 20 years now. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. And then just over the years started building, so I was just kind of in this one room that I'm sitting in is where it was just a spare room. And I had just put some equipment in here, and I had a buddy here one day tracking some acoustic songs, great guy, great songs. And he did a lot of carpentry work, and I was telling him what I'm telling you. I said, "Oh, one day I'm going to build a studio, and I'm going to turn this into this and this." And he literally put his guitar down. He's like, "Well, let's start right now." And he just started peeling down the garage ceiling.
Oh, man.
Like quite literally. Stopped his recording, and then over the course of a year, we like turned it into a studio. And that kind of got the ball rolling. So that's why I'm here.
Did he ask you before he started tearing things down?
I mean, it was what I wanted. I just certainly didn't expect in that moment that, hey, let's start a major construction project today.
So either you're like me and you need people to kind of just put a fire under your ass, or you've just got friends that like to just move things forward before you lock.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty motivated. I definitely keep going on the projects I was working on, but again, I didn't know much at the time about building anything or wiring anything, and so it seemed at the time like a very, very daunting project. Where he was actually a guy's like, "No, this is actually how it's done." And here's step one: tear down your ceiling. So, and I'll be eternally grateful.
Well, that's cool. Well, how I came to know about you was through our mutual friend Jesse Mallon. Who's you've worked with before, and he name checks you a lot, and obviously you're working together on Velvet Elk and everything else. And I saw you make appearances on his the Fine Art of Self-Distancing episodes this year, and I just kind of became interested, and I didn't realize until probably the first or second time you were on that you were and even that he had anything to do with Velvet Elk. And that surprised me. So I just figured, you seem like a cool dude. So let's talk to a cool dude and hopefully get him.
Well, obviously I've already fooled you into thinking that I'm a cool dude. So kudos.
Well, I'm very uncool. So anybody is cooler than I am. But
we'll all be in the same club here.
Well, tell me a little bit, because like I said, I've read what I can about you, but I mean, you know, I'm sure there are gaps, and I like to tend to go a little bit of a different direction than most people do. Tell me a little bit about, like you said, you grew up in Western Mass. What was growing up there like?
You know, honestly, I and having asked that, considering the what we're all going through right now and dealing
Yeah,
with the times that we're dealing with, it makes it even heightens my feeling for how I grew up. And I really grew up in a very Norman Rockwell-y sort of, you know, perfect little American dream. I mean, really, I mean, a lot of people will say, "Oh, I hated high school," or "This was tough." I did not. I loved it. I thoroughly enjoyed my time there. I thoroughly enjoyed getting into music when I was a kid there, starting my first bands. Um, Definitely just enjoying the experience of all you can enjoy when you're in school and high school and being in a small town. And I mean, you know, it's crazy to think about now, but once we left the house in the morning, that was it. It was like lock and key. You know, my dad's like, "All right, you're not allowed back until dinner." And
yeah,
we kind of like, me and my friends had the reign at the run of the town. Like there was no, obviously there was no cell phones, there was no checking up on everybody. So,
mm,
but it was a safe town. It felt safe. Everyone felt safe about their neighbors. It didn't feel like some sort of dark, ominous threat on the horizon. So, uh, you know, I just was so lucky, so fortunate and lucky. I had a great childhood. I loved it so much. If anything, I guess the too idyllic part of it is I wasn't really exposed to counterculture
mm,
as a kid. You know, like so my first foray into music was when MTV lit up my television set, and I was like,
yeah,
oh my god! Like I didn't have an older brother that handed me down, you know, Led Zeppelin and the Beatles for that matter, or the Stones certainly. Um, no one was passing along their vinyl to me, so my first foray into music was really just when that opened up, and which was like this insane insta LSD trip for all, you know, the kids of the time. And you can't think of
yeah,
it now but at the time it was just beyond incredible. So that was really my first foray into getting music, because again we were just in kind of rural America without much of a counterculture or anything else.
mm,
So I feel like I was late into the game to get into a lot of the stuff that influences me today,
yeah,
um, which are the, you know, a lot of the punk rock music, the Stones, the Beatles, like going back to a lot of that music and the Kinks and 60s and 70s, things that when I was a kid, I was, you know, because they weren't on the television, I didn't know about them or
right,
didn't think about them. But so when I first came to New York, I had an adverse reaction to being in a big city like that. It just felt like suffocating to me. It felt suffocating. Today, I thrive on it and love it. And once New York injects itself into you, that's something that never really goes away.
yeah,
Um, I know with everything that's going on now, a lot of people are like, "Oh, it's time to get out." You know, the city's over and all that. I don't think it is. I think that yes, a lot of businesses are closing, you know, and it's a tough time for bars and restaurants and a music venue. I mean, Jesse and I had one together that sits vacant still, but the people are what make the city. So when the time is clear for us to kind of feel like we can be back to living the life that a city like that provides with around
mm,
each other, I think that'll come back. You know,
yeah,
it's like when all the people stopped going out and all these cities and all the wildlife started coming back. You know,
yeah.
and well, unfortunately for the wildlife, the people will start coming back when they can do the
Right.
same. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just like today it was reported about the emissions or something being, you know, way down.
Yeah, the lowest level in years.
Yeah, because of just less, and you know that makes sense, and that should say something to people, but you know who knows if it does, which that's a whole other topic. But
Yeah.
yeah, being from that era too, MTV had a my parents listened to a lot of music, but the MTV era was kind of like, you know, my foray into my own, you know, music, I guess. It wasn't the hand-me-down stuff, you know, and so I'm right there with you with that being a major influence. And actually, my grandparents had cable before my parents did, so I'd always watch MTV when I was over there,
Oh wow.
which was cool. I don't know how I never when my grandfather was around. He was a World War II vet, and he didn't like rock and roll very much, but yeah, you know, and it's interesting, you know, the stuff that's going on right now. I mean, yeah, eventually we will all be back. We're gonna get through this. Everybody's gonna start getting the
Yeah, of
vaccine
course.
once we have sensible people in office handling it that know how that you know, quite frankly, give a shit about doing it.
Yeah.
You know, it's just gonna take some time, and what this has proven out is that not our generation, but I guess our era is extremely stupid and overall in how to just do what people just say to do. You know, it's not a matter of, you know, the big, you know, Orwellian thing. It's for everyone to live, but people were still too selfish to do the
Well,
basic.
I think Brett, that's again, maybe we're veering off of the music take, but I think that's forever and always going to be the case. I don't think it's more so now than more or less so now than it ever has been throughout like the Roman era, you know,
Yeah,
and the USSR and all different periods of times. I think just in general, there's always a subset of the population that's subject to being able to be influenced in a certain way, as every section of the population can be influenced in some way, positive,
right.
negative, whatever we deem positive and negative. But social media
Yeah,
changed everything, and
yeah.
so that's really what the difference is
So
now
yeah,
is.
social media is like an accelerant for a fire, basically.
Yeah. And the accepting of, you know, it used to be that you would accept the news as the news, and maybe you weren't getting the full picture, but it was as close to an uncolored or unbiased presentation of a small picture of what's going on in the world. But now people are getting news from their neighbor and their
Yeah,
neighbor's Facebook feeds, and that's really what's fueling this. But if that's
yeah.
all you see, if that's all you see every day, then to you that is the news. That's
And
the
yeah,
news.
then I've had that discussion with other people. There's no ideal way of dealing with that. And it's not exactly how I didn't mean to get
No, no,
derailed.
no, no. It's hard. It's hard not. It's hard not to. It's
Yeah,
hard not to.
no, it's really hard.
Hard to not think about anything else.
Yeah, when you did get to New York, what were your first years like in New York? What were you doing? Were you working a side gig while you were?
Well, I had a band in Boston that was together for a long time. Well, what seemed like forever at the time, and that I did. You know, I cut my teeth on. It was a great music scene in Boston. I mean, just fantastic music scene, and that was kind of felt like living the dream. Like my band got a house together. We built a rehearsal space in the basement. We all lived together. It was very much like it kind of came right after the grunge movement, and it felt like a lot of what you saw. It felt very in a camaraderie sort of sense, a lot like that, but in Boston and in a few different neighborhoods in Boston. And I did everything I could, you know, to work that scene. And I worked at, you know, different record labels and radio stations and magazines and played out and really just did everything you thought you needed to do to kind of move up the ladder of your
Right.
music career. We ended up getting manager, and we sort of got what was a development deal from a record label, which I don't even think exists anymore. And we went into Sony Studios to record some demos, but we had just released an album and barely had new songs. You know, we had some, but they weren't really, you know, developed. So we recorded something that wasn't entirely fantastic, I don't think. And that deal really kind of went nowhere. And at that point, we had been around, you know, we were kind of like in our mid-20s, and we had been around for enough time where a couple of guys in the band, of course, now it seems like that's baby age, but they had said, we've been doing this long enough. I want to have
Yeah.
kids, or I want to have a job, so a couple peeled off, and it just felt like it took the air out of the tires, and I was devastated, and so that was the end of that. And of course, I thought, well, that's it for me in music. But my manager at the time, they were from New York. He's like, look, and they had this beautiful. Well, it wasn't beautiful, but the concept was beautiful. They had a big loft, and down in the financial district in Manhattan on Pearl Street, and they had built a studio there and just built out some offices. I mean, it really was kind of dumpy, but for kids in their 20s, it seemed amazing. And he's like, look,
the pad,
Yeah, it was like the pad. It was totally the pad. And he's like, just come down here. You can crash, and when no one's in the studio, work on some tunes, which was in hindsight, was very, very generous. So that's exactly what I did. I took a mouse-infested storage room and like removed all the boxes and cleaned it up and like built this little bed. And I literally just I crashed there, and bands would come in. They were very hip hop heavy at the time. There was like of what they were representing, and actually a lot of stuff. There was a band called Company Flow, which is LP was in, and they were doing a lot of stuff there. And I was sort of like the resident, white dude who would come in and play guitar if they needed it, or bass.
Yeah.
And so I got to. That was really great because I got to be exposed to a lot of hip hop. Super underground hip hop, great stuff. Of course, he's on the Jewels now and ruling the world. But so there was a lot of great stuff like that was going on. And then at night, when the bands would clear out, I'd go in and start goofing around on hip hop equipment. So I would take like the MPC 2000. I didn't know anything about samplers or triggering I didn't really know anything about anything, but all I had accessible to myself was tapes from my band, a rock band from Boston. So I would start sampling my old band into the MPC 2000, or I don't know if it was the 2 or 3000 at the time, just to learn this machine. And of course, you could do all this in 2 seconds in a plugin now, but put it all into the MPC 2000 and then build these songs by triggering different drum loops or bass loops or whatever. And I kind of made like 1 or 2 songs that way, just having fun. And I remember playing them to my manager at the time. I said, "Hey, this kind of sounds interesting to me. I don't know what to do with it, but." And he was like, "Yeah, that sounds like a hit, whatever that means." So I said, "Well, you should go get someone to cover this. Let's go get it out there." Long story short, he did. He kind of like followed through and brought it to a couple labels, and it kind of led to me getting a record deal with Universal Records to do sort of like a full album of that kind of track that I started.
Okay, that's cool.
So that was kind of like, again, the whole idea of like the music industry today is on a whole other path.
Yeah.
And it's more, it's kind of all in our own hands now, I think, for better or for worse. But at the time, all I know is I had spent from my, mid-teens through my mid-20s doing everything I could to follow this sort of professional playbook of how to succeed in the music business, how to get a record deal, or that you needed all these things. And none of it worked. And then within like a few months of being in New York City and being depressed and goofing around with a sampler, I ended up having a record deal with Universal Records.
Right.
Which is just to show you that there is no rule book. There is no playbook. There's no, it's just right place, right time, luck.
It's the way things go. I mean, because you at the time, you would be right in thinking that there is a certain way you do shows and you invite A&R people down, and they check out what you're doing. Hopefully they show up.
Yeah.
You send in your demos and blah blah blah, and there was like but then around the time you're talking about, everything kind of went sideways, and everything in music changed forever because of it.
Yeah, no, it did. I remember it took me about 1.5 years to make that record, not because I wasn't ready, they weren't ready. And but it was still at a time where they gave you somewhat of a budget, you know. Of
Right.
course, today it seems like an outrageous budget, but not that it went to me, but the little tiny slice that I did get, I basically got in a car and drove across country for 6 months. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to finish this record. And I just drove across country for 6 months. Followed like a lot of old Route 66 and stayed in a bunch of divey motels and cool old relic-y, old Americana stuff. Came back. By the time I came back, I was getting super heavily influenced by like the first couple albums of Wilco. And what I got signed for and what I was listening to and interested in doing was very divergent-ish. You know, I kind of, the stuff that got me signed was more singing Beck kind of a thing. But by the time I went to make a record, I was more interested in like Ziggy Stardust and Wilco, somewhere in between, and making this sort of, you know, concept Americana record. And the label did not want to do that. But by the time I finished the record, which I'm very proud of to this day and thought came out great, the label actually was sold to Seagram's, a beverage company. And the person who signed me no longer worked there. The person who was the head of that department that signed me was no longer there. President changed over. So I think when I finished my record, my manager had to make an introductory meeting with the label to say like, oh, you signed this guy. You know, so there was nobody championing me there at all. Like no one was saying, yeah, here we go. This is a great record. This is my guy. I signed him. Like this is his piece of, this is work. That didn't happen. And it just kind of fell through the cracks.
Yeah. I was friends. Well, I'm still friends with this people in this band called the Stratford Four from San Francisco. And they were on, first two albums were on Jet Set. And the second album was produced by, I can't think of his name, the dude from Death Cab for Cutie. And they were kind of starting to get some buzz, and Rick Ocasek signed them to Elektra, and he produced, you know, their big Elektra debut. After it got done, and before they even had a chance to start marketing it, Elektra was sold, and Rick was out of a job, and they eventually got their album back, but it's like they thought they made it because it's like Rick produced Weezer, you know. It's like this is it.
Well, you never, you know, it's like the old adage of never counting your chickens before they're hatched. I mean, that's in the music business. It couldn't be more. You don't know that when you're first kind of getting into it, but now anytime anybody says, you know, this is happening to me, or I'm getting this record deal, or I might get this license, I said, you know what? Until you see it at the end of that movie, until your record is, you know, playing at the radio stations, or you're actively getting it doesn't exist. Until then, it just doesn't exist.
Well, the entertainment industry is littered. You know, the road of the entertainment industry is littered with disappointments and heartache and despair. Basically, I mean, people that think they're in, you know, they've got a big scene in a movie or a TV show, they get cut. They get, you know, they make an album for a label, the label gets sold, and they get dropped. You know, I mean, you know,
and really talented people. I mean, I have, I'm sure you do too, just a lot of friends and bands that I know and have played with that are intimidatingly good. And you go, man, if it can happen to these guys, it just can happen to anybody.
Well, you think about how fickle things are too, like how big some bands are and how you don't really hear anybody talk about, you know, certain acts anymore, but they were huge. You know, I mean, like they were like world tours, you know, amphitheaters, the whole bit, and millions of albums sold, and then people are like, you know, everything moves on. You know, it's like, and you forget about that. You forget that there are very few people that make that impact that will always be lasting in everyone's mind, you know, in some way.
No, I mean that's there's success, and then there's like success, and then there's mainstream success, then there's everlasting success. That is a chasm that is very difficult to climb through.
Yeah, especially today, and certainly you're not going to see a rock star hit that level anytime soon. The way things are going, because
Yeah.
it's out of fad. I mean,
Well, part of it is all the artists and bands that I think are the lasting type have a foundational sense that was built through. There's some parts of old school music business which are irreplaceable, which is the live performance and the touring.
yeah,
Because that's a visceral experience for the fan and the artist. Like that, having if it's a rock band, having the bass and the kick drum thump against, like actually physically feeling that on your chest, and
yeah,
the excitement of the crowd and being with people, versus where we are now, where no one's getting to do that. And if you're some of these bands you're talking about that maybe were really big and filling out arenas or for a stretch of period, it's probably because they had some instantaneous success on the radio. So their success maybe wasn't built on that foundational beginning.
mm,
A band like Wilco, who I love, who never does any radio or anything like that,
right,
never have to worry about that. And to me, that is the dream route that you take, because it's not dependent upon the system at all. At
right.
all. I mean, the hits on the radio thing is great. It's great because it'll get you that audience right away. But the audience that stays there and continues to follows you because they enjoy seeing you live. They've been touched by that experience, or feel like you're still pushing yourself as an artist because they want to go on that journey with you and feel like you're changing. I think.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of acts that, I mean, we've gotten to the point where you can still have a following. It's been a while since I've seen a Wilco show, so I can't recall recent ones. But I mean, I've seen them play Pitchfork, the festival and headlines.
Oh yeah, I mean they sell out everywhere. And again, I'm just using them.
No, but I'm saying it because that's a band I've had a long kind of history with as well. So
yeah,
it's a good example. And there are people like Coldplay, which are still, they're amphitheater bands and all that. But there are people that do, the regular touring, and will do something like I don't know how often you've been to Chicago, but like there's places like Aragon and Riviera and the Vic, which are 2 to 10,000 places, and they can still sell out places like that. And if you could do that, you have a pretty decent career,
You have an amazing career if you can do that. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like, but there still is that. People still love to, there are still fans of rock music. It's not going to be a radio thing anytime soon. Because I mean, in my opinion, the radio's been on repeat for the last 20 years. I don't see anything different now that tops the charts than what was 20 years ago in a lot of cases. I don't see a lot.
Well, that's why people seek their new discoveries via Spotify or YouTube, or and word of mouth, because great music is being made today just as much as it was before, if not more, because recording equipment is accessible to people who some artists who couldn't afford it, but most artists couldn't afford it before. So now it's hard to have an excuse not to be able to record in your bedroom. I mean, there's just a way to do it. In a way, even the freest of softwares is infinitely better technology than what the Beatles did Sgt. Pepper's on. So so there's the accessibility to writing, but with that brings the difficulty in discovering it.
Right.
Because whereas before, in any given year, you had to weed through 100 releases and go and try to find what you connect to. Now you're releasing 100,000 and trying to.
Yeah.
And so it's like needle in a haystack kind of thing.
Well, and you could say that to a certain degree, it's always been like that. But there used to be a way between media and the labels and just scenes were able to bubble up without this immediacy of the internet, social media, accelerating that by 1,000. Used to kind of be able to develop, and Nirvana would have been probably dismissed at their first, first couple of years or something like that, had they not had the chance to play house parties and
Right, right.
that, you know what I mean? It's like, you don't know, because this stuff, it's either self-contained and it comes out of nowhere, or it starts building up and maybe it's allowed to grow, and move on from what it starts as. But, a lot of times people will go, oh, that sucks. And, they keep the name of the artist in their mind as that sucks, and, and that's an unfortunate thing.
Make a quick judgment and
Right.
move on.
Right. Well, let me move forward. I don't want to keep you too much longer. But with the invention of Velvet Elk was basically for yourself, correct?
Yeah. I started it, again, maybe like 15 years ago or so, just basically doing my releases after I was no longer on Universal and not wanting to wait around for the next thing to come along. So I started doing that. So it's like a vanity thing for myself and a couple side projects that I was doing. And, but, Jesse Malin and I over the years, became better and better friends and just found ourselves doing a lot of different things together. And he's just really such a encyclopedia of music knowledge and the history of rock. And he himself has been a big part of it, especially in New York, and a lot of what has come through the East Village. And so we talked, a lot about like, hey, let's make this legit. Let's like take this label and actually turn it into like a functioning label that's releasing artists that we think are great, because as you and I have been talking about, we have clubs, we're in the clubs all the time, we're seeing these shows, and it all, every night of the week you're seeing somebody who blows you away and going,
yeah.
So that was really the catalyst. And we got convinced a friend of ours to help, kind of pitch in and get us started, and so we did that, I don't even remember how many years it became official, but, 8 or so years ago. And so now, it's hard to find revenue in the music business, and we don't take much of it from the artists at all. So the good thing about us that we always tell artists, we're like, all right, well, you have all control over your releases, and we never take publishing from bands or any of that kind of stuff. So it's like extraordinarily fair deal for the artist side, but as a business and a label, sometimes we're kind of going like, how are we going to keep this going if we don't make any money? But we do, I think through the fact that we've had these clubs and through a lot of Jesse's history, and we're just finding some incredible artists. And if all that ever happens, again, I'm not saying I don't want to succeed. I would love for our label to make money. I would love it'd be great to make a living doing it. But right now we're doing it because it's our passion to do music, and because we believe in the artists that we're releasing. And if all that ever came of it was that we took a 10 or 15 year period of time where we chronicled this amazing music coming out of New York City and beyond, but mostly New York, that's what ended up coming of it, I think we'd be and different artists and bands went on to do bigger and better things. I would be proud of that. I'd be proud of that, to know. And I can it's already been happening. I've like a number of artists that we've had, either that we still have or have had, are still moving up that chain. And it's a very proud thing for us to say, oh, we at least heard it. We at least knew we heard something, and we weren't the only ones. That's a great feeling.
Yeah. And you actually had a really impressive 2020. It's a shame that the year collapsed on itself, because Kelly Swindle and Also in My Brain and Hennessy, that's it right there. Those three acts are so divergent from one another.
Yeah, they are. Yes, big time.
But it's also, it was just a really cool trio just in that.
Yeah, I think 2020 was and this wasn't done with any purpose or forethought whatsoever.
Yeah.
And a matter of fact, so much so that I didn't even think about it until Jesse pointed it out towards the end of the year. but all of our releases in 2020 were from women.
Yeah.
And again, that wasn't like, hey, let's make this the year of Velvet Elk women. It was just like,
Right.
these were the best releases that we found for the year.
Right.
That's why they came out. You know,
but that's also a really cool thing too, because I mean, I've had pushback from people I've known in my life, like they don't listen to female artists. I'm like, why not? Like, why? I mean, that's
an old, I think that's an old stereotype. Women have certainly broke that, more than busted that door down a long time ago. And continue to make some of the best. Well, obviously, that's what we're saying at Velvet Elk. Like this is the best stuff we have to release this year. And we just, you know, we have Hennessy, who, man, they're just so inventive and quirky, and for me personally, it checks off a lot of things on the list, because they're a throwback to a lot of music that I grew up with in the 80s. But they're not a throwback to it in a way they're trying to be a throwback.
No,
it's so organic in how it's being done, and every single thing you hear from them sounds fresh and new. So it's kind of like giving you something that like gives me a warm feeling about the past, but it never sounds like the past. And that is a very, very hard line to toe. Very, very hard line. I couldn't do it, you know. And they have a new single coming out, which in a couple weeks, which we're very excited about.
Cool. What's the single called?
8 Men. 8 Men. It's it's called. It's shortened to 8 Men as the title, but it's 8 Men Have All the Money, and it's a political statement, and the video is incredible. So that'll be out, I think, 22nd of January.
All right. So right now we're just saying after a little bit after this comes out, which I believe is coming out this Friday, to go to Velvet Elk and buy the. I'm assuming, is it coming out just digitally or on?
Digitally, yeah. No, digitally, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Buy that digital single.
Yeah.
Buy everything on Velvet Elk.
Yeah.
Buy it twice. Get these guys some money.
Pay more for it than you need to.
Yeah. Then put a tip option on there. A little bucket feature to just.
Well, I think I found a lot of times, at least when I'm doing my own music, and I know a lot of my friends do it too, where especially with something like Bandcamp, that you put up a price, you know, you might put a 5-song EP out and go $5 or pay what you like. And half the time, people will pay more than that. Yeah. Half the time. And Radiohead, they were the first ones to do that.
Pay your own, pay what you want. What is 2021? I guess if there's any way to assume what 2021 is going to look like for you and for Velvet Elk, what are you thinking about right now for the next year?
Personally, I'm thinking about I've started and as we're talking, Jesse's calling.
Tell him I said hi.
Hey, Jess. Good. I'm just finishing up a little interview here. 22nd. Oh, that'll be great. All right, bye. He was just asking about the Hennessy single, because we're working with some.
The ears were burning.
So we're working on press music. What's the date again? He's all amped up about it too. So like for me, I want to make another record. I basically, after my last record, I took a little break, put a little bit more focus into some producing and the label, which takes up a lot, you know. And during this whole COVID thing, which is not over, a lot of artists I know took like full advantage of it to write and record, and a lot of my friends say, "Oh, you had it the best. You know, you must have written 3 albums or sitting in a recording studio." And you're just the exact opposite had happened to me, and honestly, I don't regret it, and I couldn't be happier. Which is that for 20 years, I've just been on that hamster wheel of make a record, spring, summer, and fall, tour, rinse, recycle, and repeat, happily doing so. But I think it's been, 20, at least 20 years that I've been home and enjoyed a summer, like
Yeah.
just been home.
Who would ever think that you could have summers off like you were a kid again? Except not
100%, Brett. That's literally exactly. And I was, as sad as I was to not be seeing friends and that everything was closed down, I was very content I made a garden, was mowing the lawn. I was, exercising, running.
it's a different thing. It gets you into a different headspace, and
It does.
Some people use it as a reset.
No, and it's absolutely what I needed. Since then, in the last month or so, I've just been back to sort of, okay, I'm making a record. And I just actually went into the studio with Jesse, the other thing he was asking me about. He, at one of his virtual shows that he asked me, we came on to do, I think I played one, it was a show where he was asking people, his band would play a cover with you and then do one of your songs. And I played a new song. And he loved it. And he's been asking me since then he's like, you got to get that out. You got to record it. You got to do a single. And then he kind of offered up to work on it and produce it. And I've not had anybody produce my music in forever.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? I need this. I need someone else. I need to just sit back, bring a song in and let somebody else kind of mold the edges. So we just did that. We started recording that last week. We'll finish that up in the next week or so. So I'm going to try to have a single out in February or early March. And in the meantime, work on this record that hopefully will come out, in the fall next year when we can get out there and roll again.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess there's talk, Anthony Fauci said something about concerts coming back at some point this year. I guess it's, it's a hopeful thing.
It's extremely hopeful.
I will say one thing I appreciate. I kind of wish more artists would have done it is do what Jesse's done. It's been fun to be able to almost every week see him in the band and guests come in. And
well, what Jesse did was extraordinarily unique, and on innumerable levels. But a lot of it. He has an unending stamina, which was great, and a great catalog of music. But it also was built. It also was that whole thing was built up from a survival instinct.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not independently wealthy and saying, "Oh, let's ride this thing out." He's a New Yorker, tried and true, and so part of it was he started in his living room, out of survival. I have to perform. I need the support of the community and to give. Then it became, there was that first tier where we all started doing live stream concerts, figuring out the word live stream and then figuring out how to make it happen. And I started doing them from the studio here. I did them for like a month or so. And I also had the desire to go, just turning on my Instagram feed isn't enough. I want it to sound good. I want it to, get some reverb on the vocals but I was alone out here. So every time I would do a live stream, learning how to use the software and get it synced up to YouTube or whatever I was doing, it was like running a little TV show. And it was extraordinarily stressful. And every time I got to the show, the one thing I hadn't done was practiced the songs or worked on a set list. Yeah. I'd be stressing it out to the moment of the show, inevitably, effing up the beginning of it or coming on late or whatever. Then I'd come on sweating, just going like, okay, all right, okay, now I gotta play some music. What am I gonna do? So that became too much. And then I think there was that next level where we all sort of became a little bit burnt out from the process, both as artists trying to do it and because of the lack of the very sort of like performing into the void aspect of it. And I think people getting burnt out, like the novelty of it wore off. And then you really were carved down to that really super, super niche core like yourself and me who are just tried and true lifers of live music, and we're still going to support it. But that was like, the Earth's core of that the music world. The crust was all
Yeah.
peeled away, and it came down to that little seed of people who would support. Jesse, again, survival, his determination and drive, but also that he had a closed venue with a beautiful stage and sound systems. I mean, a lot of artists don't have that.
Right.
And a bunch of people that are not working.
Right.
Would love to be working and doing something. So he was able to, as he often is, bring a community of people together to do something bigger than any one of us could have done ourselves.
Right.
And so, and no one is a technician in this world of how do you live stream. So you're talking about people who had to sit at home and figure technical, get some serious technical credentials. So when I've done these shows with Jesse, and I actually just filmed one myself this week, which will be aired later. I was supposed to air the 19th, but I feel like we'll probably be, doing some Civil War-y kind of things.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hold off, not to make light of that at all.
No, I know what you mean. It's like you don't want to, quite frankly, you don't want it to butt up against some sort of mega thing where it just takes everyone's attention away from what you're doing.
Everyone's attention. And then, it's also a thing of going like, well, maybe the world needs a distraction to put these positive things out.
You can never know how to properly figure out, but there's so many avenues that I think putting something out, but I get your reticence as well to
But the fun thing was, it was, what Jesse's created there at the Bowery Electric in New York. I mean, it's basically a television studio. It's quite impressive and amazing. And unlike a television studio, because in the past, we've done like these little television shows where it is very detached, and you're in front of a camera. You're not really playing through a sound system per se.
Yeah.
This is a television studio, but you're also fully mic'd up, wired up, and playing through the sound system. So, when most of us haven't been touring for a year, and I had a couple guest singers that came on that are in bands that do very, very well, that were almost not in tears, but they were moved because they got on stage and said, this is the first time in a year that I've heard myself through a PA system. Like just that simple thing of standing in front of a mic and just like feeling the energy behind you. That's been stripped from all of us for a long time. So that's exciting to be able to do.
Yeah.
Hopefully those continue for a while. I know he's going to keep working hard to bring some special shows there, and occasionally some of us will get into try to replicate it the same way.
Yeah. Well, there's like, I've thought about, there's a club here in Chicago called the Metro, and that's the way like a place like that is set up. And I know they've done some filming before, because most of their stuff has been filmed and put out in some way. But I was always thinking that, different cities should just have like, or there should be a club in different cities that says, okay, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to get a team together for filming and live streaming, and then we'll work out, swap out like 2 different bands each week that come in, and we take all the precautions, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I would imagine, but I don't know the economics of that, whether or not that's, sometimes it's, I watched something on the food business last night where these owners were like, it's cheaper to close now instead of waiting another week and throwing money down the drain for, and just put everybody on notice now that, we're letting you go. So it could be more cost prohibitive to do something like that than anything. So maybe I'm just talking out of my ass.
No, I think most things are cost prohibitive, and the grim economics of it are even at its glossiest best, which are, Jesse shows and these shows that are being produced at the Bowery Electric. Those are the best live streams you're going to see. I mean, pretty much hands down, unless you get someone, I mean, Nick Cave did an amazing one,
Yeah,
but you're
Foo
talking
Fighters
about,
did a really good one.
we're talking about like film crews and,
Right,
a ton of money on the
right.
independent level. I
Yeah,
can't imagine a better one than what's coming out of there because of what they have set up. That being said, even if you did one and you sold tickets for $25 and had 100 people buy tickets or 200 people buy tickets, which would be good, for any independent artist to get that many people to pay for that. Still never going to be that much money because, you're talking
yeah,
about, using a venue that is suffering and not
right.
open with
And
employees
it's
that
not
are,
selling any virtual alcohol.
no, they're not, they're getting very little out of it and giving the time and the space. And then you have a
Right.
technical team that's executing it. So at the end of the day, even at its best, no one's walking away going like, I'm going to keep doing these.
Yeah, I kind of figured that, and that's the dreamer in me of like, oh, this would be a cool thing to be able to do, but maybe it's something people consider doing once we come back and there's like off nights. It's like, get a couple of local bands into a place and put that out, and so that you don't have an off night. You just kind
Yeah,
of.
but Brett, here's the thing. Once this is over, people are going to stay out for like a full straight year and just get drunk every night. No one's going
That's
to be
true
back
too.
there.
Nobody's gonna be back home.
No one's
Yeah,
going to come back inside.
that's true too. Well, I suppose you're right. I'm a bit of an indoor cat these days, as I've gotten older, but that's one thing I appreciate about the internet part of this year. But I'll still go out to shows.
Yeah. No, me too. Of course.
As I
Can't
get
wait.
older, I'm becoming more of a grumpier dude, and I just like I don't want to go out. Just like, but that's just me. All right. Well, I think I've gone on long enough here. I really appreciate you taking the time, Don. It's been good getting to, have an idea
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brett. I
of
appreciate it.
what you're about. One last plug for Hennessy, 8 Men, January 22nd.
January
Velvet
22nd.
Elk Records, digital. Buy it. Buy one for your friends. Buy 20 for your friends. Buy $1 million. If you've got $1 million, spend it on Velvet Elk.
I'll take it.
All right, Don. Well, thank you very much for your time, and you have a good rest of your day, okay?
You too. Stay healthy.
You too. Thank you.
We'll
All
see
right,
you
bye.
soon.